slides were very good. I'm impressed.
So we can go across and
It's like the U.S. Constitution. Everybody's fancy today.
Thank you.
Oh,
Great, I'm going to call to order the Education Committee of January 26th here in Council Rock. We're going to start with introductions. To my left, please.
Hi, I'm Gina Booth.
Bob Vicky, School Board.
Andrea Mangold, STEAM Supervisor.
Michael Roosevelt, School Board. Mike Thorowitz, School Board.
Ed Salem, School Board.
Matt Fedrickson, IT Director. I'm Tom Barnes, School Psych at North.
Joe Hidalgo, School Board.
Andy Sanko, Superintendent.
Nicole Crawford, Director of Elementary Education.
Al Funk, Director of Secondary Education.
Yota Pali School Board. And Mary Ann McKee, School Board. As we see, we have 4 agenda items for this evening. We're going to have some terrific presentations on the STEAM program, Nights for Knowledge. We're going to hear again from Dr. Barnes on his work. And then our final 2 items, the calendar recommendations and class size guidelines. So I'm going to keep our meeting going at pace here, and I know that we'll have a lot of discussion on those last 2 items, so we'll try and move things along so we still have some gas in the tank when those 2 come up. I'm going to turn this over now. STEAM, I believe, Mrs. Mangold,
Yes,
back to you.
thank you so much.
Thank you.
So first of all, I just want to applaud the board for having the foresight and vision to support the STEAM program in the elementary schools, because it really is turning into something that is much better than even I could have expected. I only have 2 or 3 slides. First one is where we started. So back in late summer, right before school started, we had a pretty narrow planning window, which was at the time it was problematic, but just by the graces of the folks that were hired to teach this program, the specialists, we managed to close that planning window rather quickly. We started with a 6-week introduction to concepts and expectations for the students, because many of them were unfamiliar with what they could learn in STEAM, what they would be learning. So that looked like 6 weeks. In some schools, we shot, the shot was for 6 weeks, but it was more or less depending on the school and the amount of students. We also took the time to organize our priorities. What exactly do we want them to learn? How are we going to measure it? What is this going to look like? Where are we going with this? And that was based on the supplies and technology that we had available to us at the time. At the time also, and this is still a concern, there is a space challenge in some buildings. It's just the facts. So now, where we are, now that we're halfway through the school year, we have a good deal of collaboration going on among the STEAM specialists. I know they meet once a week to share lessons, to plan together, to find out what works, what doesn't work. So they really have a nice network of helping one another. They take a lot of time demonstrating and reinforcing expectations for students. This program has a life of its own because of the energy and the excitement of the students. It's kind of a boost and a plus that I don't think we really accounted for. We couldn't have accounted for it in our planning. It's just a really nice side effect of kids doing things that they like to do. There's a little bit of freedom in there, a little bit of autonomy, and it's a dynamic classroom, that's for sure. We are able to present some professional development opportunities. The last time we had a full professional development day, we teamed up with the Technology and Engineering Department, which is primarily in the secondary, in middle and high schools. And so we had all of these teachers in a room together, and basically what we realized is a variation on a theme. But what's really good is that we're building relationships with this T&E department, because the science standards in Pennsylvania are still in flux, they're still changing, and they're representing more of the STEAM and engineering than ever before. So it's really wise for us to at least forward think this and say, okay, now what are we going to do for kids so that it isn't a bump, so that it's a nice flow through elementary to middle school. The budget development is this year. We're programming for next year now. So what we're hoping to do is build on what we have and expand a little bit further. The creative use of existing resources, that's just repurposing what we already have, and things that, because of the depth of experience of the STEAM specialists, they're able to find things, and things that they've used in the regular classroom, things that they know from colleagues. And so a good example of that is the engineering curriculum, the EIE curriculum, which was purchased by Renee Delva for the science program, but we just repurposed it for our uses, and it kind of worked out really well. One of the things that, if you can go on to the next slide, that would be great. So where we're headed, The thing on the right, that little graphic on the right, is one of our STEAM specialists, Jen Sinisi, created that. And it's really well done because it's bright, it's colorful, and it's a visual for students to remember exactly what they're doing in STEAM class. It's not the engineering design process. We have a different image for that. But this gives kids the permission to go outside the lines a little bit, which is exactly what we want them to do. STEAM is so different than other curricular areas because it's meant to be authentic and a demonstration of growth and attainment of skill in STEAM is a little bit harder to gauge because you just can't take a pen and paper test. So one of the things that we're planning for next year is to build on the student and teacher experiences that we're having this year. There's a learning curve involved for sure. We're already thinking ahead that, okay, so if we're starting this in the elementary school, the student that then arrives at the middle school with 5 years or 6 years of STEAM experience is going to be a very different student than arrived this year. Middle school students and high school students now don't have the benefit of this program, or maybe they did it privately, but it's going to be a change that we see that trickles through, kind of like waves through up into the secondary program. And so for that, Kevin Malalu, who is the curriculum coordinator of the technology and engineering department, and his group over there are really eager to help us. They've got equipment, they've got material that they are more than willing to train the elementary teachers on. So, you know, we know that we're on to something. I meet frequently with a district or county-wide STEAM program supervisors, and it's interesting how, you know, you learn from their mistakes. You can watch, you can see what their programs are kind of, you know, up and down, they crest, they fall, but it's just interesting to be able to tie us in, almost like Christmas lights. We've got a strand on the elementary end, we'll have a strand in the middle, and a strand at the high school, all running on the same current. So it's really promising. We're going to continue to optimize the district opportunities, the things that we have in place. That horizontal integration is what I was just talking about, and that's including science, math, art, into what we're growing, and then budget and plan, hopefully for consistent resources across all schools. So one of the things I talked about was it's difficult to assess how well a student's doing. What are they learning? How do you measure growth? What are you trying to measure? So in lieu of that, in the beginning of the year, since we really don't have a paper test, we gave the kids a survey, just trying to almost elicit from them their natural, authentic responses. What does STEM mean to you? What does STEAM mean? What do you want to learn in art, in math, in science, in technology? So that was administered, I think it was mid-September, if I'm not mistaken. So we did it again. We kind of tweaked the questions a little bit. It got a little more specific. So when one question specifically said, now this is going to give us a standard. It's going to give us a baseline. What have you learned about the engineering design process? So the whole thought was, do they recognize that term? Do they understand what it means? And so what you see in that graphic are their authentic answers. Yes, some are misspelled in there because I literally went into the Excel sheet, I copied all of their words and made that visual for you. But you can see the language that these students are using. That is not an adult interference in any way. It was an open-ended question, what have you learned? And so those are the words that they're representing and associating with STEAM. So to me, that demonstrates growth, it demonstrates success, and it certainly gives us an opportunity to set up a trajectory for this program that I think that you would be very proud of. And also from the STEAM teachers, they have extended an invitation if anyone from the board would like to come in at any time and see them in action. They would love to have you in there because they're going to sit you down, you're going to roll up your sleeves, and you're going to build something crazy, and you're going to do it like that. So thank you. If anyone has any questions, please let me know.
Great. And Mrs. Mangold, before we get questions from the board, I just wanted to note Mrs. Marcel has joined us for those listening to the meeting. Great. So thank you for that. Any questions from the board?
Speaker?
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you again, Mrs.
Miss,
Mangold.
I'm sorry, just clarification. Mrs. Mangold, you mentioned space is a challenge.
Yes.
What are the schools doing, since I'm not exactly sure which schools are
So
overly challenged? What are they
we'll
doing?
start with the worst case, which is Wrightstown Elementary. We have Danielle Pugliese, who's done a great job of managing. She shares a room someday with an art specialist who's there, and then other days she's in the library. She is mobile, she's on a cart. So, I mean, it certainly is very different and very challenging in that school. I mean, to go in and watch, in fact, Kevin, the T&E coordinator, and I went and visited her while she was teaching 4th grade over at Wrightstown. She was in the library, and she was doing coding with Ozobots. And it was just interesting to see. To her, it's routine, and to the kids, it's routine. But it really was a compromise. So that's one of the things. And then the second more problematic one, I guess, is Nikki Burkbeck over at Holland Elementary, who is sharing a classroom with an ELL teacher. So it's a matter of a few tables in the room. It's just that one of the things in STEAM that you like to do is you like to give the kids a chance to build things. And when you build things, they don't want to take them down, and there's no place to put them. There's no place to store them. Now, there are many other classrooms that have this space, but those are the two where it kind of impinges on the full freedom that some kids elsewhere in the district
Which is
have.
consistent with enrollment we'll be talking about later. Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Is there a third place school that is sharing the space?
It's really those two.
Those
We
two.
just actually met with them yesterday,
Yeah.
and we spoke about it, and I do want to say that they're doing a great job of thinking outside the box. We've met with both of those teachers as well as their principals, just looking at ways that we can maximize their spaces, how we can best store their materials,
Well, yeah.
work with other staff within those buildings so that everyone's sharing some of those challenges, not just one specialist. So I do have to share that.
For example, I have a space at Newtown Middle School. They gave me a classroom. So what Nikki and Danielle do is when they're not using things, they ship them over there. So if you go into that classroom, it's just filled with, it's like a storage spot. But it's helpful because when I go in there, I'm like, where did this come from? It had to be Nikki or Danielle, which is fine, I don't mind it. It's a huge room, and it's good because we just label things and it's left alone, no one raids it or touches it. So to that end, I mean, that's working, but I know that it adds a little bit of an extra layer of concern. They have to plan different. They have to plan for different activities. Everything just looks slightly different for them. So.
Great, yes,
I
Mr.
have a
Lee?
question. You mentioned budgeting. I'm not sure how far along is it. I mean, where do you see it going? I mean, how are we with staffing and whatnot?
So the budget that we've prepared for next year is probably going to be the biggest one, I would imagine, and I have never done a budget before, so you'll have to forgive my novice approach to it. But for instance, let me give you an example. The Ozobots I discussed, and this is just an example. Some teachers have full class sets. Some teachers have one set of 10 that they're sharing. They would like to have, ideally, in order for all students across the entire district to have a fair and equitable chance to do the same thing, fill it in. So what the budget reflects is filling it in so that there is equality in supplies and availability. There are some things that are costly that we decided rather than buying one for every school, why don't we buy a nice healthy set and share it? Can we do that? Yes. Some of the programs that we're looking at, we're having a company called Tech that's going to visit us on the next professional development day, and they provide a STEAM, they have a custom-built STEAM curriculum. You pick one, and it's teachable from anywhere from K to 6. The nice part about this program and this company is when you buy it, you own it. So you can adapt it any way. It's supported online. It gives teachers all kinds of adaptability and different technologies. So for example, if a school had iPads and not Chromebooks, you can use it there. You can use it with Ozobots. You can use it with Spheres. You can use it with Microbit. So it's a really dynamic curriculum piece that we can buy and maybe build on later. And then the engineering is elementary. We're going to backfill in that. So what you're going to see in the budget is a little more of the technology bits and pieces, like the small things that kids are going to be working with, and 1 or 2 purchases that are actual curriculum. So that's, and I looked at the budget, and we sat as a group And we looked at that budget and we, I can't justify, no, we just gotta delete that. It's a great thing to have, we would love kids to have it, but maybe we'll apply for a grant for that one, let's just stick with this. So it's a lean budget, but it's thoughtful, it's not discretionary in any way. Everything that's on there will absolutely be used, is proven, and nothing is old tech, meaning we're not buying something that we tried or maybe are hidden in a closet somewhere in the district and no one is using. Also, these STEAM teachers are making great use of the lending library at the IU. So the IU is able to lend some of this technology out so they can test it before they buy it, and that's free, so.
And if I may, I just wanted to add another piece to that. After reflecting with the STEAM team and many conversations up here at the cabinet level, we do feel that it would be helpful and necessary to add 0.2 to the total staffing of the STEAM team. Currently, if you remember, we have 6 full-time and a 0.8 specialists. We do feel that making that 0.8 specialist full would help in a variety of ways, but currently, one example would be that 0.8 specialist is split between, scheduling-wise, 3 schools. And looking at that piece in of itself, just having that additional 0.2 will help with the scheduling of the specialists and making sure that it's working for students the best that it can. So that is a request that we will be putting forth this spring as we look at staffing.
Any questions? Seeing none, we're going to move on then. And Nights for Knowledge, Gina Booth, thanks for being with us today.
Absolutely. As facilitator of Nights for Knowledge, it is my honor and excitement tonight that I share some of the program details of Nights for Knowledge's district math program. So the purpose of our program is to provide supplemental math support to students district-wide in grades 3 through 8. It's an open opportunity for all students in these grades, bless you, to get some additional support through Council Rock teachers who are providing these learning sessions each Thursday night. The focus of our areas of instruction, they are targeted very specifically to student needs. Prior to the opening of Nights for Knowledge, when teachers recommend students for participation, we had asked them to upload student assessments, concrete student assessments, so the teachers for Nights for Knowledge could then review the assessments and know exactly what specific areas needed to be targeted for the specific students. At this close of the second marking period, I have just started to reach back out to staff and compare the students who are currently enrolled for Nights for Knowledge, share those lists with teachers, and ask them to share more data with us so we're making sure that we continue to hit the greatest areas of needs for kids in a very specific and purposeful way. We revisit foundational skills each week to ensure the kids are ready for new learning with the math curriculum. We reteach current classroom content. Some of the teachers have said if you're struggling with homework that night, it's a Thursday night, bring it in, we'll look at it together. We review grade level priority standards as well. So it's very aligned to what the children are doing right now in their curriculum in those specific grade levels. We're looking for measurement for program success. We've heard you and we share that importance of being able to measure what we're doing, what we're spending money on, and how beneficial is it for our students. We are looking at starting focus groups of grades 3, 5, and 7 and using progress monitoring with specific groups of students who are consistently attending Nights for Knowledge, and then being able to report back to you at our next education meeting with some specific data points ready to share. And then Mrs. Crawford is going to talk a little bit about the cost of our program so far.
So the cost thus far has been $17,500. That includes the staffing, the 27 teachers who are teaching for Nights for Knowledge, as well as some preliminary prep work that they did before the program began, and then their actual teaching hours. As I've shared previously, this is being fully funded with our ESSER funds.
A little bit about student participation. So as I had mentioned, teachers were able to recommend students for participation. District-wide, grades 3 to 8, we had 384 students who were recommended for participation in this program. There was specific criteria that each teacher needed to consider when recommending their students. And to date, there are 281 students that are enrolled at Knights for Knowledge. That number can fluctuate. There are students who I still get emails during the week. Can my student come? My child come? Absolutely. We share the form, they register, and they're in the next week learning and sharing time with us on Thursday nights. Our current attendance weekly average is 72% right now. And those are the numbers of sections we are running in each grade level. You can see that there are 3. Grade 3 has 6, 4 has 4 sections, 5 has 4 sections, 6 has 4 sections, 7 has 3 sections, and 8 has 2 sections. We try and keep our numbers purposely a little bit lower because we want to make sure that we maximize the time with the students who are struggling in this area in particular. One of the things that makes our program even more special is our partnership that we have developed with the high school students in both Council Rock North and Council Rock South. That's a Council Rock South student there, Madison. I caught her while she is teaching her little group of students there. If you were to walk in, you would see a teacher facilitating a whole group lesson, Council Rock teacher facilitating that lesson. Some small groups tend to break out during the night. And if there is a high school student in the classroom, they facilitate some of that reteaching and a little bit of extra support for the students as the teacher is working with other groups of children simultaneously. We have, very proudly, 74 high school kids district-wide who are committed to this program. Each week we send out a little sign-up. There are about 12 kids that come from week to week, and the numbers can vary depending on their other responsibilities that they have. But the consistency of them, their positive attitude, and really, Madison's a great example because they are all coming in smiling and welcoming the kids each week, and it really makes a difference. It's a great way for them to give back and for the kids to learn how to kind of look at older children as role models in the district as well. I think I went over all the responsibilities that they shared there while we were talking. Some additional program areas that we are proud to highlight tonight. There are 24 Council Rock teachers that are involved in teaching our students on Thursday nights. The collaboration with their new teams was immediate. These are teachers coming from all over the district. They got on email with each other. They met outside of the school day to start talking about. They were looking at student assessments together. They have been in it and completely committed to this united force in helping our kids close some math gaps. They very quickly build a classroom community. Some of the other positives of the program, it's more than just math. It is kids coming together across the district with a common purpose and a common goal. They are making and building new friendships, and they are learning to really be patient and learn things together as a group. They're also already starting to increase their confidence, already getting parent emails about how much better their kids are feeling, how supported they are. The kids are talking about how they appreciate learning things in a smaller setting and just taking a little bit of time to really digest what they're learning in their classrooms. Family communication, we have consistently asked the staff, keep emailing home each week. Let families know, what are you working on? What are you focusing on? Because we want to bridge that communication between home and school, just like families are very used to and accustomed to in their regular home schools. There's check-ins at student dismissal. Sometimes that's the best way to check in because the parents are coming in to pick up the kids and our teachers are there. You need to tell them something real quick, something they're struggling with. The teachers are right there on the fly and you can have that quick conversation. We're motivating students when they come. Our delivery of instruction, we're not just sitting in desks, during this 90-minute period. The kids are actively engaged, they're learning. We're breaking up into groups. We have one-on-one. There are games, math games that they're playing to build on these skills as well. The kids come in each week. When they're present, they earn a ticket. We do a raffle, make it fun and exciting for them. Pull tickets each week. They come down, the more chances the more times they come, the more chances they have to win. So it's just a way to kind of get their buy-in as well. And it's been a really positive experience for the kids to come back to school at night and be as happy and as positive as they are. Really speaks volumes about the program and how they're feeling, in my opinion, towards the subject of math already.
And Gina, I just wanted to add that any family that expressed interest in their child attending Nights for Knowledge, we've shared previously, no one would be turned away. So even after we received our recommendations from the teachers, and even after the program has been up and running, we have allowed, of course, any parent that came to us and asked that their child join, we obviously honored that. So I think that's important to highlight as well.
One other thing to add before we field any questions, I think it's important for the board to hear that, and I don't want to sound overly dramatic in saying this, but it's kind of pioneering work, you know, to have a night school during the academic year, during the academic week. Nicole and I have an opportunity to go to the Bucks County IU every 5 or 6 weeks, and we meet with folks who have similar positions throughout the county, so a lot of assistant superintendents. Nicole and I spoke to our program proudly at our last meeting, and I have to tell you, a lot of inquiries, a lot of interest around the county. So I applaud the board for their endorsement and approval of this program. So far, so good. Thank you.
Great. Yes, Mr. Salmon.
Well, I'll dovetail on the Pioneer comment. The board responded to something the administration brought to the forefront of learning loss. It's our job to provide for the kids. I think it's a no-brainer. Where it amazes me every day is that the work that our people do for our kids. I have a 3rd grader that's happy to go to night school. She's bringing snacks this week. She's meeting friends from all over the district because she knows no one in her class. She's thrilled to go to school. That's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to provide for our kids. So, not the board's okay. You're going to spend about $88,000, $100,000. It's a drop in the budget for a $262 million budget. $100,000. We get to spend $100,000 on our kids are doing something wrong here. We should all look for another position. On Mrs. Crawford's comment, I saw a post over the weekend. I emailed you guys. A mom was looking for a tutor. Kid goes is in 7th grade at one of our middle schools. I won't mention. I sent mom a text saying, "Why you need a tutor? Why are you going to Nights for Knowledge?" Her response was, "I don't know what you're talking about." So my only comment would be, please, let's, whatever we got to do, add it to the list on Friday. If your kid's struggling, because there's a lot of people out there making a lot of money on our kids as tutors. We can do something here to augment that and help. Let's do it here first with our teachers. But Gina, the work you're doing, it's God's work. That many kids on a Thursday night, happy to go to school. Well, not everybody, because I shared a story with Mr. Sanko, Dr. Sanko. It's a great story. The daughter pulls up at Hillcrest and says, "What mother would do this to her 7th grader?" And she couldn't drive. She had a floor, she's dying. She's laughing so hard. So lo and behold, last weekend, Dr. Sanko runs into that student and says, "How's Night for Knowledge?" And it was like full exorcist. But at the end of the day, as I say, these moments, we're making moments every day with these kids. That kid will respect her mom, you know, tomorrow, next week, maybe 10 years down the line. I don't know. But we're doing the right thing. At $100,000, and anybody that inquires about it, they're behind the ball. Councilor Rock is leading the way. So my hat's off to the administration. We're going to hear Dr. Barnes later talk about stats and statistics and things. But this is what I think a board should be doing at all times, forward thinking. We have a problem, we see the problem, we identify the problem, how do we attack the problem? And collectively, the 9 members of this board, you know, we may not agree on some things, but we do agree that kids are first. And that's important to me as a father, it's important to me as a board member. Good work. I'm looking forward to hearing about the tests, what we're seeing, what we can identify, and how this is going to run into summer school. Because I think it's a natural fit for maybe some of our kids.
It's just it's an extra special opportunity
Yeah.
for us to partner with so many pieces of the district.
And the
So
kids in the
many layers
classroom,
of
I mean, getting
kids.
links hours and,
Yep.
and working with kids. I know
Absolutely.
kids with kids, it's positive. And then you have teachers that are dedicated to do this. Thank you, Ms. Good stuff.
I know Mrs. Holly has a question, then Dr. Forward.
I have two questions. So one is, do the teachers at the Night for Knowledge evaluate every student to see their progress, or is there a plan to do that? Because that could be a good way to know where they started, how much they progressed, and how well they can do differently to help them.
That's a great question. We do have the data so for example, if I use a third grade student, for example, the teacher who is currently teaching that student shares the student's assessment with the teacher at Nights for Knowledge. We do that in every couple of weeks, so we just asked for the second batch. So it's about every 4 weeks where we're looking at new student data that's hands-on in the classroom data. And that way, our teachers are then looking at that, and they're looking for opportunities to reteach skills that may need a little bit more, students may need a little bit more time to learn. So we're looking at that. We're also going to start, we have in progress, starting right now, focus groups in grades 3, 5, and 7 with progress monitoring that will show you specific pre-data before they started Nights for Knowledge, and then we'll be able to track groups of students as they are progressing through the weeks of Nights for Knowledge to show that growth and progress within our students and be able to measure something in a concrete way.
So this would be great as a general measurement, but for a specific student, how can we help them the most to know where they are and how they progress? And maybe you do this evaluation, I don't know how often, and then you figure out maybe you have to change something because the evaluation is from the daytime teacher, right? Not from the nighttime teacher. And so I don't know if there is any plan to figure that progress.
Mrs. Crawford, do you want to speak a little bit more about some of the things we had talked about with measuring that data?
We're having these discussions now in terms of the best way to get benchmark data and whether we want to do summative, assessments or using more formative assessments where we're capturing that data week to week. I think that the goal was to get the program up and running, get the students engaged, teachers teaching, but we are looking at those pieces right now in terms of, and it's a little difficult because every student has their own point that they're starting at. So we're looking for growth and balancing that with finding out how we know that they're achieving and that they're moving in a forward direction in the program. So we are prepared at our next meeting to be able to share an update about that. Did I miss something?
I think you had another question.
Yeah, my second question actually is, when you go to the IU and you discuss this with your peers, what do they do for learning loss nowadays? Do they have programs? Do they have any kind of initiatives that you think you can share with us?
Well, again, this program is certainly unique, so we
definitely
piqued the interest of the room when we started to speak about Nights for Knowledge. In terms of other things that surrounding districts, and there's 13 districts in the county of Bucks, but I think it's a struggle for everybody. I think part of the reason why the room was so interested is when you talk about intervention programs, especially when you saw the results of state assessments, everybody is interested in some sort of intervention intensification program. I'm trying to think of any unique programs that we heard about.
Not district-wide. I've spoken with counterparts, where they said that they're doing school-based tutoring, and, that's something that they haven't had previously, after-school tutoring, before school, but not so much district-wide, elementary and middle school levels, 1 night per week. The format really didn't sound similar to us. It was more individual school tutoring sessions.
Have you looked outside of Bucks County, because the idea is Bucks County, to see what others are doing? Because I know you benchmark constantly.
I think the hard thing, and I think the reason why we kind of look outside of the academic day here is, it's like the academic day represents a pie. You can kind of You can slice the pie up any way you want, but you can't necessarily make the pie any bigger. So as educators, you're always looking for more time. How can I spend more time on intervention and remediation? So I think we look often, I know other districts do this as well, within the schedule for unique periods of time, whether that's a win time at the elementary level, whether it's a drop period at the middle school. The high schools are beginning to explore advisories. So any type of period within the actual academic day that can be used for intervention and remediation. I think that seems to be the trend for folks. Well,
Dr. Thorward?
You said actually the most magic word in your thing, you probably didn't know it, that's confidence. You know, when I had my first child, they asked me what I wanted her to be when she grew up, and I said confident. Confident kids take risks, they're willing to learn. I saw it with our STEAM thing tonight, and I see it here. I just want you to know that it's not just the kids you're educating. All of those high school kids, they're growing because of this too. So I applaud what you're doing, and I hope if you don't have enough high school kids, go ask again. Because there is a mindset that they have enough, you know, I mean, but if you need more, ask, and I think you shall receive. We as a board, I think, are going to make a trek over there, or some of us next week, so.
We're excited to have you.
We could
Actually
teach
see
too
it
if
in
you'd
action.
like.
Seat on the
But no, thank you. I mean, you know, my wife's not one of these high-paid tutors, but she does tutor at spot. And she strives for confidence. As much as what the material is, can I make the child confident with so thank you for that.
Certainly, the foundation of student success is self-belief that you can do this. And that's our first step in really closing the gaps.
Good.
Absolutely.
Yep, Mr. Roosevelt.
I'm also very excited about this. This was something that I think all of my colleagues around the table were excited to hear. We're grateful for the administration to bring this forward. And this is just a nice appetizer of results. And I want to commend and applaud everybody that's been involved in this. I echo Mr. Shaman and Dr. Forward's comments, as well as I'm curious to know, I'm aware of a couple parents in our district who have commented to me about their students attending college, either the first year or the second year. And some of the students coming back saying, I wasn't prepared for this. And these are the kids that were caught in that learning loss gap. So I'm concerned also about the 9th and 10th grade students. And I'm wondering if there are any evaluations or if there's any ability to get these grades incorporated into this program, because I agree, having a confident kid and having kids helping other kids become confident and grasp the material is really wonderful. It's a huge part of education. It's a great way to demonstrate proper behavior and proper outcome for a lot of these kids. And this is the type of program that keeps Council Rock on the top. This is wonderful, and I agree. I mean, this is pioneering. I'd be curious to know how far the pioneering goes, both across the state as well as the region. And this is the type of thinking and collaboration that demonstrates what a willing board and a reflective administration can accomplish. And it's great. And I just want you guys to go. Get more kids involved from both the high school, middle school, elementary school. Let's just get as many of them as possible, because we only have them for a short time. Some of you sitting around the table have been here for a long time and have probably been able to watch a student, many students, grades of students, classes of students go all the way up. And it's, I only had the opportunity once so far to shake some of those graduating students' hands, and I can imagine how impressive it must be for you guys to have seen that child go through all. So this is great. Thank you.
Other questions or comments from the board?
I'm going to put Mrs. Booth back to work at Hillcrest Elementary next Thursday night.
We are so appreciative you know that.
Absolutely.
Thanks,
She
Jen.
was happy to do it.
Good.
Happy to be a part of it.
Thanks so much. We look forward to hearing back from you next meeting. Good. So now I believe we're on to Dr. Barnes.
Thank you so much. I think I'm going to go up front. My slides, my exuberance to get all the data onto the slides and under the heading. They're really small, so I'm actually printing out handouts if anybody wants an up-close view of these. We'll just leave them out here and pass them around. I'm going to go up here too so I can see the numbers. This might remind me of one of the first speaking engagements I had in Council Rock, where I was invited to talk about an area of expertise. And speaking before me was the U.S. Congressman and the Director of Air Force One, that he had also brought out to be at the same conference, and I was the third person. I just remember mumbling something and just saying, I will never again speak after a U.S. Air Force One. And now I'm going to add to that experienced classroom teachers and my colleagues talking about a really cool thing. And here I am teaching math at 7:30 on a Thursday. So thank you for indulging me. Thank you for having me back again. And it is January, it is School Director Recognition Month. Thank you for what you do to keep students first always, and thank you for all the handshakes and the words of encouragement since the last time I stood up here. So right away, I just kind of want to start with a reminder of why I'm up here. Right? So this score pattern happened in our middle schools, and Dr. Sanko was kind enough to contact me back in October, November, to see what we could see. And Mr. Frederickson took time out of his day to build a monstrous database, which I've been using, as well as other databases that will be just available to the public to kind of help us along our journey to understand those scores a little bit better. Obviously, so the difference was, and the scores from Hollow Middle School and Newtown Middle School, and they were on that table over there. And on the right, we have this process chart, which, right there, which may actually help frame questions as we go forward. Sometimes when you're measuring things, or when you're undertaking an ambitious educational project, it kind of helps to know what you want the outcomes to look like. So if it's successful, the outcomes are going to look one way. If it's not successful, it's going to look the other way. And I think as Mrs. Powell brought up a few times, at least back in December, knowing how you're going along the way so you don't find out at the end how it went. So we certainly don't want to have a situation like this. Or if we do, we want to understand a little bit of what those numbers would look like next year. So I promised you two things at the last meeting. First, that we would take a look at the score difference at hand, and then we would walk it back in time a little bit to see if the difference in scores actually started in 7th grade or whether it happened somewhere along the road, and could we then catch it back then and kind of change the trajectory going forward. So as I promised, I took the 8th grade cohort and I walked them back to 3rd grade in 2013, and then I took the 7th grade students and walked them back in time. We're going to see what that looked like. The second thing I promised you is when you're looking at PSSA scores, we're typically looking at proficient in advanced, and generously there's below basic, basic, proficient, and advanced, or 4 categories. I proposed at the time a more high resolution look at this, dividing that 4 blocks into 11 blocks. And I'm going to talk a little bit later why I did that and why I think it might actually help guide some decisions and analyze some program outcomes. It will be specifically related to the PSSA going forward. All right, so here's a graph. Again, I apologize that it's a little small. I hope people can see it. I know it's in your slide deck, and they have the handouts, so we want to kind of follow along on the bouncing ball. First thing to know is this red line is Newtown Middle School. Blue line is Hollow Middle School. The black line here is the state average for PSSA math in 2012, in 2022, and we all of that. These two numbers here are right from that first table. They're the 8th grade scores for Holland Middle School and Newtown Middle School. You can see there's about a 12-point gap. So what I did is I took a look at those same students and looked at how they did in grade 7 in 2021. And again, we see about a 12-point difference in the scores. On the left here, this is your percentage of people or percentage of students that are achieving the proficient and advanced or advanced scores on the PSSA. 2020, there was no PSSA. Walking these same cohort of students back to grade 5 in 2019, rather rinse repeat. So you have about a 12-point difference. From a statistical point of view, having such a consistent difference between the two scores over that many students over that period of time is somewhat, I didn't expect it. Let's just say, let me explain the pointer, the red and for the laser pointer. These scores, obviously you see one dot for grade 5, but those that know that there are 4 elementary schools represented by that dot. That dot is something called a weighted average. So you just don't take the 4 elementary schools and find out what the average percentage is because they're different sizes. What you do is you take all the students that achieve the proficient advance and divide it by the total number of students taking the test. Just as a simple example, if you have like Austin Elementary School, and they had 1,000 students, and they all got proficient and advanced. So they're at 100%, and then you have the below K Basic Elementary School, which had 10 students, and none of them got proficient advance. They were all below basic and basic. You don't add the 100% and 0% and get 50%. Because 1,000 out of 1,010 of them actually got proficient advance. So you have to weight it. And when you weight it, it comes up to like what it should be. It should be about 99.099% proficient in advance. That's what those numbers are.
Sorry,
So
how do you weigh again? I missed that part.
the schools are different sizes. So the more students in a bigger school, they have more weight. The average has more weight. And those in smaller schools, just because there's less students. So you're talking about a student-by-student comparison. You're not talking about a school versus school question. Now,
Because these are not the same students, just.
They're different, yeah. So you're not looking at it by school per se. You're looking at per student in those 4 schools. Well, I'm sorry, 6 schools in Holland Middle School and 4 schools in Newtown. We've been talking a little bit before the meeting about those of you who want to know a little bit more about those kinds of things. Maybe there would be something I can publish or make available. They're great questions to understand those numbers. It depends if you want to join me on my journey into the dark side of numbers or not. I'll take you there. But you just let me know. I'm just going to go forward. And those are questions that I just love to answer. So, so the first takeaway from this is that there is a score difference that occurs here, and it's actually fairly robust. It goes back to grade 3. In both the in Newtown Middle School and Holland Middle School and the feeder elementary schools that go into those. Another takeaway, way down here, is the state average for those things. Folks in Council Rock are getting a great education. And one thing, and I'll get to that a little bit later, it's just some of the next steps that I plan to get, because you can actually do this for other schools in Bucks County and other districts. There's publicly available information that I can get. and just do the same thing. So you'll get kind of an understanding or, where things kind of fit in with the scheme of things. And I guess the last thing you'll notice is there's, this box up here is the kind of the point drop from like 84.9 down to 46.6. So I have minus 38.3. This is what, 38.5. These are remarkably consistent. And what I'm talking about is a drop between these in third grade, percent proficient advanced, and percent eighth grade, these same students in middle school and grade 8.
I hate to bother you, I have a question though. And I think I've said it before, it just drives me bonkers when we compare ourselves against the state. Is there any way you could load into Bucks County and compare us against like schools or schools that we benchmark around the state against? Because as you talked about, the numbers of the schools are bigger, and the numbers of the state are competing against other school districts that should not compare to Council Rock in terms of delivering quality education. So I'd like to see, like, how do we do against Central Bucks? How do we do against, pick another school that we're comparable in size to?
We can look at all the school districts in the state that have population bases the same as ours or larger. We can collect that data and do that analysis. The answer is yes.
Great.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'm not looking for it tomorrow. I just, for me, and I think, I didn't say it was going to. I think as our taxpayers would like to know, especially when we're talking budgets, tax increases, I don't want to compare to Philadelphia. I don't want to compare to Pittsburgh or Allegheny, ever. I want to compare to like-minded, like economic situations.
So similar population, similar.
That's my opinion. I mean, I'm only one of 9 on the board, but if we could put it in there and toggle on and off.
Listen,
You love numbers, Tom, I know.
these are to help.
No, I think this picture shows a lot that education in Pennsylvania is but where does that compare to? I want to see what Council Rock compares with the districts. If you could, as only one board member asking.
Right, so, and Dr. Santa signs my timesheet, so. It is kind of it's a not small undertaking, but
You don't have to do everyone, I just get me 5.
If you tell me which ones you
All right,
are.
I'll get I might be clear.
This is one of those rare cases where questions along the way might actually be helpful, because there are some areas that could be clarified then before moving on to the next one, so, and happy to do that.
Thank you, sir.
So if you created something similar for Council Rock, the numbers would be in between the two, right? Depending on the population between the two schools. Because if we compare Council Rock with another district, we're not going to look at the different schools within the district, we're going to look at the districts, correct?
Well, I'll tell you what, that's a decision you can do in your book. So,
You don't know how to roll up.
So, you can do it by district, you can do it by schools. In some of the bigger districts, like Central Bucks, they split the elementary schools going into the middle school, so it's a little harder to parse out those data. I was able to do it for one district, one middle school in Central Bucks that actually had, consistent base. I've already started moving in those directions, so I can easily exceed this request because it's already started. So, I mean, I just have to know how my kids' middle school and elementary school started with Central Bucks. Yeah. This is the second kind of graph that I promised you. This is kind of the higher resolution look at this is the below basic line, basic, proficient, and advanced. Those are the scores you're used to seeing on those tables. We break them out for you. Over here we have Newtown Middle School, it's grade 8. Over here we have Holland Middle School in grade 8. And instead of doing the 4 categories, I broke them up into 11 bins. And these bins or bars or categories, whatever you want to call them, are based on these scale scores that your kids get on their PSSA reports. So you have 600 plus, 681, and they're in 80-point bins. So I chose 80-point bins for a reason, and the reason is this red bar here. This red bar here is the people at the very upper end of basic, just waiting to move into the proficient rating. Okay? So what that means, as you'll see in both graphs, it's the tallest bar. So you have kids that aren't miles away from the proficient category. So you have a ton of kids that are right on the cusp. You may not have to move mountains. I think confidence is a great word. I think motivation is a great word. There are things that you can do to kind of pique, kids' interest. Maybe give them practice on the test itself if you wanted to do that and move them in. Of course, it ultimately comes down to what you want a Council Rock education to be. Is it that important that we do that? And if it is, they're waiting. They're right there. So down here, what I've done is I've taken the scale scores that they get, and right below it, these are the raw scores on the PSSA math that they would have to get. There's 41 point multiple choice questions. There's 3 4-point open-ended questions. Fun fact, if you have 40 multiple choice questions and you guess A for every one, you're going to get 10 right. So when you're looking at the raw scores, there aren't many people. You would actually have to know math to get a 0. Because you would have to avoid accidentally getting a 1. So, and I thought it was me. I'm a lucky behavior analyst. I'm looking at this. I said, oh my God, there's no 0s. There's no 1s. How can somebody have a test? But that's the way it is. One question that you may ask later is the difference between multiple choice and open-ended questions. There isn't. They're actually pretty straightforward, correlated, right up like 0.89. So working on one versus the other, you get out the same return. So what these are here is the number of students waiting there to move into that next round, and how many score points we're talking about. So there's a lot of folks in those categories, in those grades, in those schools that are kind of right on the border. And if you're looking at remediation programs, like if you're asking a teacher, all right, find, who are the kids that need the most help in the classroom? Let's do some of these nice phraseology, some of the great remediation work that's already being done. You would expect movement in these farms here, and we should take credit for that. We should look at the same kind of bars next year when we're looking at the SSA school from this spring, and just see movement and appreciate what's being done in those categories. So this next graph is, it's like the same one, except that I started 7th grade and moved back. It's tricky for some of the people that I was presenting this to earlier. Here's grade 7 in 2022. It doesn't go up to grade 8, not because I ran out of time, but that's the end. The next data point out here is going to be grade 8 2023. Next time, when we're looking at the next batch of PSSA scores, based on the trends that I'm seeing, we would expect, or predict rather, not expect, because we expect that everything's going to go up. But we're going to predict that, knowing nothing else, that it's going to be a little bit lower when we get out here. So our obligation as educators is really to get in there and see what we can do about that. So you'll see, of course, the drops are a little less robust. It's only -30 or -26 points. But remember, we only have 4 years, so there's another year. So the trends look the same. I think this was important to do, because these are totally different students from the ones we just looked at. They're the same schools, but they're just totally different. It's a robust effect, which means that I didn't just get it with 8th graders, I got it with 7th graders. I want to go ahead and predict, that I've walked back, and you would get the same kinds of patterns.
I have a quick question, and I'm not sure, I'm curious to see if it makes sense in terms of the data. So if a child in middle school starts taking honors in higher classes, they eventually take the Keystone exams, is that correct? Instead of the PSSA?
So the Keystone assessments are aligned to specific courses. So Algebra 1, for example. So you could have a middle school student who is taking Algebra 1 and takes the Keystone in 8th grade.
So with that kind of thought, so that student would show up like on, kind of like along each one of these data points, and then they drop out because they're taking the Keystone, essentially, in 8th grade?
They take the PSSA too.
So this is, these are,
They would generally take.
Oh, they take both?
yeah, they take both.
Oh,
This is PSSA, this is not Keystone.
I thought someone was telling me that they only took one. So we still actually have them that whole entire time. We're not losing that data. Okay. Just because I was thinking if we were losing them, then maybe that was part of the reason why it was dropping so much in 8th grade. But, so they are taking both. Okay, thank you for clarifying.
Well, you know, I love the question because it actually gets to one of my closing thoughts. It's like this trail ends at 8th grade. What does happen in high school? I'm pretty proud of working in this district. I think it's do very well. So there have to be some metrics, and that's what I'd really like to do is find those metrics in high school that say these scores show what they show, of course. But at the end of the trail, things look pretty good. I assume. I recognize they look pretty good. So, this is, of course, a duplication of the past slide. For 8th grade, that was for grade 7 in 2022. And I want to show you the robustness of this, the high bars, the red bar, waiting just kind of on the edge, a couple of lost 4 points away from having them in the proficient range.
If I could, I'm going to kind of talk to Al on this one. Tom's he wants to know what we could do in high school. The long tails out on the advanced level of these charts, I mean, it's not much detail. That should be a predictor because by grade 7, you're in a math track. That should be a predictor if we used even just enrollment in some of the math, accelerated honors, AP. It's going to be a course measure for you, Tom, but there is a way to see, did we slice and dice that tail, and frankly the tail in the other direction as well, just based on classroom enrollment. I'm looking at you because I think it works, but you're closer to it than I am.
Yeah, I mean, we have a pretty highly stratified curriculum at high school level, so you have your foundation, you have your academic, accelerated, honors, AP. So, you can kind of get a sense of what the numbers, how things are going to unfold, and you can see some kind of trends within those classes. The high school has the benefit of, because our math test is Algebra 1 Keystone, which is essentially an 8th or 9th grade course. So our advanced and proficient rates are kind of inflated, right? Because even then, if students then perhaps did not meet the proficiency mark, they could take a retest in 10th grade. So we have the benefit of that. So sometimes we may need to think about a different type of metric.
Well, that's why I was thinking the enrollment number, even just enrollment numbers, not scores, perhaps.
Right.
Now, we're changing rulers on you in terms of measurements. I get it. But
Indeed.
yeah. So.
And one thing also to notice to your point there is if you look at the raw scores, look at there are these last like 3 bins are 52, 51, down to 48. Look at the first 3 bins. It's like 0 to 6. So it's weighted toward this end of the curve. You're right. And so only 1 point, one raw score point differentiates those two. So it's a harder kind of category to find. But maybe we should be looking for something that captures both ends.
Yeah, I mean, you've heard Nicole and I speak about this PVOS, value
There you
added.
go, there you go.
So, for me, and that kind of measures so chronologically, did you attain 1 year's worth of academic growth for that one academic year? Some students don't necessarily meet that criteria, other students exceed that criteria. But that, I like the PBOS reports, and you actually get very good projections in high school because it's based on your PSSA from 3rd grade, so 3 to 8. You get a projection and a prediction about what your high school score should be and where you should fall. So we take a look at that PBOS to get the value added, and then it's really a singular look at an individual student and where they project. That's meaningful data for us.
The only caution I'll make there is it's based on a model, and models always say what you tell them to. And that's fine if the model doesn't change from year to year. Do we have any control over that, or would we know if they change the PBOS model?
The PBOS is based on the state assessments.
Okay,
So
so
if
it
we
doesn't-
wanted to have internal metrics,
No, but it's pretty static is what I'm getting at.
Yes.
Because state metrics sometimes change.
They do.
So we haven't given that data yet to Tom to analyze. No, it's on the list. These are, I think, excellent questions. And kind of where long-term we're headed. We're just, what are we, month 2 in this? Right?
Well, yeah, this is your first round of data. And I think maybe the next rounds are guided by what you guys want to know. I've done it, I've taken the liberty of looking at some things that I was interested in, that I'm going to look at anyway, and if I get the bill for them, that's great. I was interested about what would happen if you compare the 2 middle schools and their cohorts, and when you subtract out historically underperforming groups of students. So, would then the scores equalize? And what you found is the scores differed. There was change in the scores, but it wasn't very predictable. So I'd love to kind of like share that with a quick graph. One of the other things that I'm doing is I am plotting the ELA scores in a similar manner, just to see if they stay the same, and stay the same, and the math doesn't. So, and remember that these categories are set up, I won't say arbitrarily, but it's not a norm reference test, in the sense that somebody said these are the scores that you need to have, and this is what it is. So it's very difficult to do inferential statistics or anything like that. So, and the other thing that we talked about early on was examining like the effect of curriculum on student performance in every school. What you would do, or what I would recommend doing, is taking an 11 or even maybe 13-point bin and just do like 3rd grade 2015, 2016, 2017, and see where these bars are moving. See if there's some kind of curriculum, because that's how you would do it. You would look to see if a teacher given a curriculum, or teachers given a curriculum would produce change in those things. And it's not like something you could do, like next year they went down, oh, well, it was the curricular teacher, it's a trend. So things happen as you're in the classroom, we're public school, everybody is welcome. So you don't really have control over who goes to which classes, so it's a little difficult, but you have to look at data trends, and I think it's doable, especially when you have like a finer grained analysis of what's going on. I think that's where I want to stop, because it's more important for me to then get on to your questions and what you would like to see from the next step.
I said before the meeting, I'll say it to Dr. Sanko's edification, we should write a paper on this, and by we I mean this group over here. I think this is a unique thing that the nation ought to see in terms of a different way of looking at things from people in the trenches, not from academics looking from outside. Tom, you blur that line. I know you do, but I really think it would look good on Council Rock's website to have that paper, to look good on all your resumes, to publish something like this in a journal, because when you're finished, you're going to have some really interesting findings, I think.
Okay, you know,
And so I just want to encourage that, that's all.
And Mr. Roosevelt?
Yeah, looking at some of this data, hearing your analysis and your interpretation, I'm left with a couple of concerns, but I'm also left with some real encouragement. So the concerns first, it's concerning to see the trend is going down. And it's concerning that the gap between our two middle schools remains relatively consistent, but that they're throughout. I think that's a concern. It would be nice to understand how we can normalize that. You've already talked about it. The positive element is these red bars. And we kind of touched on this, or my comments were surrounding this, and the last time with the generic model. And now we've actually got the real data. So that's exciting to see. And this demonstrates, I'm wondering if we could do, talking about expanding Nights for Knowledge, kind of like a level 2, to kind of hit on these red bars to see if we can push them on the other side, seeing how they're so close. I think that would be really remarkable. And picking up on what Dr. Forward said, this is another pioneering moment. And you put these two things together, I mean, you can even add STEAM, all three of these together. I think, yeah, I agree. We're really close to having some broad, some wide interpretive elements and some raw data that not only demonstrate how to identify your problems, but how to fix them. And how to fix them maybe faster than you thought possible. So that's I think I agree. I think that's really exciting.
And I would just add to your comment that I think if you look at those three areas, looking at the investment that was made,
yeah,
and hopefully looking at the results,
yeah,
that it was a really good investment per student, or however you want to do that. But obviously, Nights for Knowledge is less than a STEAM special, but like collectively over time, at some point, that might be something that can be analyzed. But I agree with you completely.
Yeah.
I have a comment, okay. And if you'll excuse me, I'm going to sort of repeat something I said earlier about the PSSA data and when it comes into individual buildings. And I referenced Mrs. Crawford and the great job you would do with our faculty meetings. And just for our public to know that while Dr. Barnes, you're giving us high level and very important, really great data, this data is shared in each school, among faculties, among teachers, so that they look specifically at who can we move. This is something that goes on in every building. I don't want to overstate the importance of PSSA. It is one snapshot. It's an important one, and certainly the scores jump out at everyone. I want us to be careful not to get into a teach to the test mentality, but into a mentality of how do we move our kids? How do we cover not just curriculum areas, but those essential learnings? And Dr. Barnes, if in any way we can get this so that it's really relevant to individual teachers, which questions specifically are our kids stumbling with? Where's the gap between 3rd to 5th? Why is it going down? If any of this can be tailored for the folks in the classrooms to make their instruction more effective and isolate those areas where we can move those kids who are just right, as you say, on the cusp, I would be glad for anything that would address that. But again, want to acknowledge that happens whenever test scores come in. And we talked before about formative tests, summative tests, and the difference. So anything that would be of particular help to classroom instruction, I would be glad for.
Thank you. I appreciate the comment too. I mean, because the point about teaching to the test is extremely, it's important. We're here to educate students, and the value that I hope this would have, if it doesn't affect the students in a positive way, it has no value. So having it in the classroom is possible. I have to clarify the extent of that request now, because
yes.
It can be done. But it would really, I think, really require an investment of time. I think it would do anything to work it. But just kind of getting at class by class, building by building, year after year, those data points. And do we want to make the PSA that data point? And I think there might be some others. So,
Agreed.
you know, the points are very well taken. We appreciate it. So.
I thank you for all that. Yes, Mr. Salmon?
A couple things. One, we started this conversation last March, and I think a couple board members said just spoke to staff was one thing that was discussed at the middle school level. And what's interesting now is when we look at this data, and I will compliment the state data on this situation. And there's parents in here, I'd love to hear your opinion on this, but, I mean, right now, there's 22 people watching this, you have 6 parents, taxpayers. I get 100 emails this week about things that have nothing to do with education, and to me, this is alarming at every angle. But what's interesting about the state level is, and drilling down on the grades, is something I'd like to see, but it looks to me almost like it's a curriculum issue across the entire state, on a downward trend across the board. Because if the state's only averaging 43.5 in grade 4, and we're averaging 74, is it's not necessarily a count for our teacher, it's a curriculum that the state's mandating, or the state's presenting.
Let's talk about the test.
Right. So as much as I'd say, yeah, and I said this before, I'd like to see every kid, every teacher examining, it's state standards that I have to question. But with that being said, we have some data that I think is actionable. So I would turn to the administration. I'd like to hear from you folks, maybe not now. What can we do? What can we do? What's being missed? The ELA point that you mentioned is something that I'd love to know about, because I think there's some parts of our math program that is comprehension heavy, and kids that are struggling reading or may not grasp it. The word problems become issues. I see it in my own. So that's another part of it. But where do we go from here? And I think one thing I circled around and asked Mike about, and now so that's my one question. Here's my next question, and I think Mike touched on it. But if we're seeing a downward trend in 7th and 8th grade, are we seeing changes, and I think you sort of answered this, are we seeing the ratio of enrollment in those higher end classes down? Are we seeing that middle piece more? And maybe you don't have the answer. But that's what, that's where I'm struggling. And that's just coming from looking at a couple numbers here, having a great conversation with you folks, but talking about education, which is exciting.
I mean, I'll just give you a couple comments. I agree with you that I'm reassured when I look at Dr. Barnes's graph, the consistency. I mean, it's remarkable, the consistency.
We're not applauding it.
Right. I mean, the $64,000 question becomes, well, how do we close that gap? But the fact that it's consistent leads you to believe, well, maybe it's not something that we thought it was. At least there's consistent implementation of the curriculum, and the programs are pretty lockstep. But still, you're left with this lingering question of how you close the gap. When I look at 3 through 8, it's also remarkable that you see this steady decline. But that begs the question: is that a test issue from the state? And the test from the state, I'm not trying to bash the state, but they will change the assessment every now and again, and then you'll see a spike in the data. It's just different. So how the test is actually formulated, I think, does impact the scores. I will also say, just intuitively, right? So 3rd grade math compared to 8th grade math, the eligible content continues to grow. So if you're doing order of operations here, and then you're doing exponents here, it just continues to grow. And then you get into algebra and geometry and some of the high school courses. So, perhaps that's a reason why you see a little bit of the decline. But for us, it's always about, and I love Dr. Barnes's breaking it down into the 10 deciles or 11 deciles, because to me that's meaningful. It doesn't matter where you fall on the continuum. It's about moving a student from point A to point B. And sometimes the remediation intervention program looks a little bit different depending on our student's learning style, but that's the key. It's A to B. We got to keep moving the students, whether you're on the left end of the continuum or the right end. You have that equal right to be moved by the school district, and that's what we're here for.
If I may, just to put it, you heard me talk about rulers before. Remember, each one of those dots as it goes down, slopes down, that's a different measurement. I mean, and while they may be consistent, we're measuring different things year to year. I see that downward slope as, and I don't necessarily mean a deceleration. The rate of learning is slowing down because the concepts are getting broader as you take more. And so some of that is that downward slope. Yeah, nobody has to like it, but the consistent delta is the thing that screams at me, not the slope doesn't, it really doesn't bother me as much because the measurements are different year to year, to a certain extent. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, it is, you know, it's like world history. Every year, world history gets bigger. And it just does. And so, you know, the measurement from you, it has to change because you can't fit it all in a classroom. So math's a little different. Math concepts stay the same, except we fool around with spirals and all the other things. But it is, math just is. So I'm less concerned with that as I am about the very consistent delta, which says we're missing something, you know. And I don't mean that in a negative teaching way. We're missing what the cause is, and we can fix it if we know. And so please, you know.
Well, yeah, and I mean, it's a process.
Yeah.
Yeah, because certainly the folks in this room will be able to come up with a bunch of ideas about why that actually might be so. Some of them may be testable. And I think we can take a look at those. Just as a personal thought, I was getting back to a question I was asked at the last meeting. It's like, what tests might I use to maybe figure out the difference in the delta and the difference, you know, between the blue and the red line sloping down. So the sloping down, like you said, the percentage of people or students, rather, in those categories is plottable, but every point reflects a different metric. So the test does change. The manual for the PSSA says just you can't compare, you know, 7 to 8 or 5 to 4 because they are just fundamentally different. They're, you know, that different, but they aren't a linear progression from one to the next. So they certainly cover the same areas, but they do so in different ways. So the scores aren't directly comparable. But I thought that maybe, and it may seem over colloquial, but it's a very complex question. Is like, what grade were your kids in when you were unable to then help them with their math homework? You know, or what level was that? Because I'm trying to get an idea of interest. I believe, you know, or part of it is some people lose interest in math after a while. They just do. It's not part of their reality. I'm never going to have to differentiate equations when I go, or I'm never going to have to solve for X after high school. But everybody still reads. You know, they're a profession, whatever profession you're in, you're probably reading, you know, every day. It's a skill that people they don't have it leaving high school. They get it to the extent that they need to get it, but they do forget that. Even like picking up this project. Now I teach, you know, multivariate statistics to psych students, but somebody wants a stem and leaf graph. You know, I gotta get out the book again, you know, because it does go away. If you've learned a foreign language in school, you've never, you know, you may have forgotten it, I actually say. So I think interest plays, like, how do we motivate kids to like math? So, yeah, well, that's the beauty of those presentations, isn't it? I mean, because I think the motivational component of those two activities that you heard about earlier are huge. I mean, the coolness and the content is amazing, but the interest, you know, it's like, guess what I get to do up here? So or guess what, we could lose a spaceship, things like that keep kids interested, in math, I think that's gonna have returns.
Mrs. Valley? Yes.
And then I'll come to you, Mr. Hickey.
And then,
So I think
And
it's a
Mr.
great discussion, and I hear like a lot of like good possible explanations. But what is really our objective? Because I think we're trying to understand if PSSA is a good exam, if it reflects the level of learning, and why does it have a downward trend? Because this is not Council Rock only. Apparently, it's the state, right? So are you trying to explain the state, or you're trying to explain specifically for Council Rock? Because if the trend is like that for the state, that means no matter what we do, unless the state changes the exam or the whatever the kids have learned, we are going to have a good time affecting it. So it's going to be very difficult for you to answer for the state through Council Rock. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, at least I think. I think
I think you do. Yeah.
If the state is in fact mandating a certain level of content, certain areas of content, and that's the way they're judging the quality of the district, then the downward trend, it's concerning. The idea is we're not delivering on that. So if that is, in fact, if that's the reason, or if that's the standard that we have to abide by, then the downward trend is. But what does it really mean? Is that what we should be doing, devoting our resources to? And again, it is a community decision. It's a discussion. And I think they're going to be ongoing. It's not going to be settled tonight. But what you'll have at least at your disposal is an accurate measure of where you are in that process and whether or not you're satisfied with the results. And then you can try things. You can see if it changes those numbers in that presentation of the data. And then making more informed decisions as time goes on. I think Mark Klein says this is not a speed bump, this is a luxury line that changes very slowly. It changes. But to expect it to kind of like just hop around and turn, it needs a process. And that's why I think that wheel needs to kind of stay up there. You test some ideas and see if you're right.
Great, thank you. And Mr. Hickey?
Yeah, it's a great presentation. Just a couple things. Math is an odd, at least from my own individual perspective, if you don't understand the concept at second grade, then there's no way that you're going to understand. If you only understand 80% of a concept at third grade, then when you hit fourth grade and you're supposed to know 100%, you only know 80, then that number is just going to increasingly decline, like you see. I remember I took Calculus 1 and, I had to just say for the sake of argument, I got a B. But I didn't understand 80% of it, so when I took Calculus 2, I was lost. And that B quickly became a C, a D, an F. Whereas, so it kind of explains all that. The other thing that I do want to just, what Mr. Solomon talked about, I'm not really interested in how everybody else does necessarily, because when I look at that black graph, if we're 20 points higher than the graph, that means there's somebody 20 points lower than the graph. And like you said, I don't want to compare myself to to Philadelphia, Harrisburg, Pittsburgh, whatever. Like you said, I would like to see where we stand, either A, within the county itself, or B, like-minded districts, to see exactly where we're at in comparison. Do we need improvement, or, we always want improvement, but where do we stack up, apples to apples, as opposed to somewhere where they don't have the resources to provide that we do? Like I said, are we spending our money in a good way? Are we actually educating kids successfully?
Mr. Hidalgo?
Tom, thank you so much. I appreciate it coming back with the data, the first step in the long process of remediation. I wanted to, you brought the data and it shows long-term downtrends are systemic across the state. It still points to a discrepancy between the Holland Middle School and it's a clear discrepancy between the performance of Holland Middle School and Newtown Middle School. So that's something to explore. And then the one data point that I'm not sure anybody mentioned out, that's an aberration that changed, that looks different to me, is in the, can you go to the 7th grade lot chart right there? Yeah. So you have, you have the Newtown Middle School from the 6th to 7th grade going up, which is, really nice, right? But it kind of stands out compared to everything. And what that is the kids in those 3 or 4 elementary schools going to the middle school in 7th grade and being taught that year and then taking the test in the spring, right? Is that about how it works? They take the in the spring? So what I'm finding is when I'm trying to help my student and I'm taking some old practice exams and showing them going through the practice exams all the way from 17, 18, 19, all the way, I can see where his gaps are, where his losses, and you literally just have to get on something like Khan Academy or IXL and hit those disciplines, and get them up to speed. And I think that's really going to help. But my question is maybe drill down and look at what they're doing at Newtown Middle School in that 7th grade last year. And if they're doing the same thing this year, we're probably going to see some more of that. Because it's different than the state, it's different than Holland Middle School. So that's what I get from this data.
Your point's well taken, and when we start to look at when we start to segregate the data, there's a lot more balance than just kind of the downward trend. The downward trend still generally falls, but there are exceptions, right? So you pointed out a good one. And when you take out historically underperforming students, a funny thing happens in the middle school, and I'll show you the next time we get together, about how certain populations contribute to the scores and not quite the way you think. I don't want to get too far into it because I'm one of those people who has to look at things 4 or 5 times before I, put it out there in public. I started going down some of those rabbit holes. That's one of them. There's something that's happening, every schools I want to check out. And those things can be, in fact, instructive. So again, I appreciate it. Okay, so that's...
Anything else from the board for Dr. Barnes? Thank you. Great. Again, we thank you so much. Appreciate your work.
Thank you so much.
And now we're going to talk about calendar recommendations, and I think, Mr. Funk, you're going to take the lead.
Thank you. This will be a little bit of a less scintillating topic. Council Rock School District 2024-2025 school year calendar. So I'm just circulating the draft for your consideration on the calendar. So this is a conversation that we started during the last Education Committee meeting. So just some broader points about general factors influencing our thought process when we consider the school calendar. First of all, there's a few state requirements to consider. PDE has a requirement for 180 instructional days. PDE defines their school year as July 1 to June 30th, so essentially we have to be done those 180 days by June 30th. We have had some additional holidays that we have added to the calendar, and you'll notice we do have the Eid holiday reflected in this 2024-2025 version, and that is on March 31st of 2025. Election Day, we talked about historically, has been a day off in Council Rock School District. So there are some days that are added into the calendar, and those are just some of the variables that we have to consider. Educationally speaking, we have heard from administrators, and I can speak to personal experience, that when you start getting into that 3rd week of June, engagement of students starts to become an issue. At the high school level, there's other considerations. You may have students that have to take a college or university summer program. You may have military commitments for graduates. So we try to not go too far into June and lose the engagement of the students. As you know, we did administer a survey in the fall, and essentially we asked two broad questions. One question was, would you like to start school before Labor Day or after Labor Day? And then the second question had to do with spring break. Would you be in favor of a 3-day spring break or a 5-day spring break? So just to refresh you on the results of that survey, we had over 1,700 responses. And for the first question regarding Labor Day, 45% think the school year should start after Labor Day. 30% of the respondents think the school year should start before Labor Day, and 25% did not have a preference. A little bit stronger results in the spring break area, where 57% would favor a 5-day spring break, 35% a 3-day break, and 8% do not have a preference. So I'll draw your attention to the bottom of this handout, and this has been a general rule of thumb that we followed in the district regarding Labor Day and where it falls. So if Labor Day is September 1, 2, 3, or 4, we generally start school after Labor Day. If Labor Day is September 5, 6, or 7, we generally start school before Labor Day. Okay, so I hope that kind of makes sense. So with all of those variables, considerations, and look, I will add this too as a caveat. Some of these, how you feel about a district calendar is rather personal too, isn't it, right? So whether you own a shore house or you are accustomed to taking a 1-week vacation in the spring, so it does make it a little bit more difficult to kind of, create a calendar to serve the greater good. But again, we're really trying to take in all variables, look at the survey results, look at what we think about in terms of, from educational perspective, students in June, engagement levels, and this is kind of our best college try at things. So what you will see reflected is, because we did have, well, we will have in 2024, Labor Day falling on Monday, September 2nd, we do have a recommendation to begin school after Labor Day. So that would be first day of school would be September 3rd, grades K to 6 and 7 and 9, and then all students would report to school on Wednesday, September 4th. We did include the 5-day spring break, and that would fall April 14th to April 18th of 2025. We did include the Eid holiday, and when you bring all that forward and you look at your 180 instructional days, the last day of school would be June 17th of 2025. We have had success with having a predetermined graduation date. We'd like to continue with that. So graduation that year would be June the 12th. So that is the Thursday of the week before the 17th. So
24, 25.
this is, again, 2024, 2025. The board has already approved the school calendar for next academic year. So this is for your consideration for 24, 2025. Thank you.
We appreciate the recommendation, and we'll start the discussion. I'm looking at Mr. Salmon because this is one of the things where you always say, because you always remind us, and it's so true, whatever we decide, we will not make everyone happy.
No, nor will we, yeah.
Yeah, so that's why.
So I want the college schedule, where we give off multiple weeks throughout the year and keep the kids in school throughout the year. So nobody wants that. Mr. Funk, it doesn't matter what you put in front of the parents. They will find fault with something. They will take their kids out of school and our staff will take off. It doesn't matter. If this is what the administration thinks is the most effective calendar, so be it. But I will tell you, truancy numbers will go up if we track it that 17th of June, because Wildwood does not stop because school's still going on. Mr. Aiken, right? I'm being serious. Listen, if this works for the administration, who am I to say no? Parents are going to yank their kids for Disney trips, whenever, or wherever they go. So I struggle with the 17th of June, but again, if you want it all, that's what you get.
Thank you, and that's what I'm looking for. If we can come to some consensus tonight, that would be great.
I'm easy on this, Mrs. McKay.
Went to you first, Mr. Salmon.
Thank you.
Other questions, comments, Dr. Thorwald?
What Mr. Salomon said, after this year, I will not have children in the district. Whatever works for these people is fine by me. So it's.
Okay.
I'll talk.
Mr. Hidalgo?
Is this the first we see this? Okay. That was my question. I mean, obviously, I don't like being the 17th. It looks like going before Labor Day's not trending. It wasn't something we do. I like a full week of spring break. I'd rather do this full week of spring break and have a couple days the next week. If people aren't going to be here the last 2 days of school, plan on it. Really. And so I'll agree with Ed Solomon, whatever the administration wants.
Okay, I've heard three saying this is all right with them. Mrs. Pally?
Yeah, so this really satisfies the requirements of the survey. So you ask the public, you heard them, and then you create something that will make the majority happy, not everybody happy. So you start after Labor Day, you have 5 days spring break, you have the new holiday. It is the 17th of June, the school is open, the students have to go. If the parents allow them not to do it, that's a different story. So I'm totally okay if the administration likes it and suggests that.
Thank you, Mrs. Pally. Mr.
She needs one
Roosevelt?
more. Somebody not.
Mr. Roosevelt, Mrs. Marcel, Mr. Hickey's okay with this?
Yeah, I generally think that recently you guys have done a great job of accommodating public interest and responding to things. I also think that you've done a pretty good job of combining the colors so that you have that break where it makes sense. Having decent, come on. So the only slight modification, just because I'm a challenger, is why October 9th instead of the 10th? I understand why the 5th in November, but to have the kids come to school for 2 days and then get off and then come back and then get off and then have the weekend. Now I realize some of these green dots are end of marking periods. Right. So I get it, but once you get
Yeah, a lot of that's based on the 45-day marking period or interim progress reports, but I mean, if that, we could look at the 9th. So your suggestion would be push it to the 10th.
Just, so since we have something to talk about.
But it's a lot, because you're gonna have people start their family vacations beyond before the 10th.
Right, and maybe it's an opportunity for some kids to look at colleges. Maybe it's an opportunity to have the level 2 Nights for Knowledge. I don't know.
Was that chosen out on purpose? I mean, the 9th?
No, I think it has more to do with what we spoke about with the marking period days and interim marking period. So, yeah, it is dangling a little bit there. I understand that.
Yeah.
So if there's critical mass to move it to the 10th, I don't think we would be opposed to that.
1 day's not gonna make a difference.
Sounds good.
I think it's smarter. You're gonna have access to
Yeah.
that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. We'll
Yeah.
make sure
Good catch
reflect that.
on the fly.
Good job. And you should care. Pattern recognition.
Colors.
Great. Anybody else? No. You're getting a thumbs up on the calendar.
Thank
That's
you.
great. We can move with that. Thank you for that presentation. And now, is it Mrs. Crawford?
Yes,
Great, thank you.
thank you. So we spoke a little bit about some of the space challenges that we've been experiencing in regard to STEAM earlier in the presentation, but this evening I want to talk to you a little bit about a short-term plan that we have established to address the pressure points that we're still experiencing at both Holland Elementary School and Wrightstown Elementary School. We made the decision that it would be wise at this point to ensure that we are not breaking any more sections at either of those schools for next school year. And so I'll take a step back and just remind you of how that typically works. June 1st is a really important date in the elementary world because that's the date that we lock in our enrollment numbers and we can start to plan staffing and such for the following year. Right now, because of the space issues that we're experiencing at both Holland and Wrightstown, that if we were to break another section, another class section at either of those schools, I'll use Wrightstown as an example, we would then be moving essentially to a second specialist being on a cart or being moved to another part of the building. We already have space being used in the gym. I know you're all very well aware of what that looks like currently, but one more class section that would break there, that would be the next step. So in an effort for a short-term solution, just looking ahead to next year, we would ensure that we are not breaking any more sections, even leading up to June 1st. So there are several sections between the two schools that we're monitoring very closely. We're working with our central office registrar. She is keeping myself and my assistant informed every time we have a new registration at either of those schools. So please know we're going to continue to register students, but if we get to a point we hit one of those, we're capped at across a particular grade level at either Holland or Wrightstown, she's going to inform me, and then we have to close that section, that grade level, and then this is consistent with what we do now. If we are capped at a building during the school year and we do not have room for a newly registered student, that student then moves to a neighboring school. It does depend on which school. It's the closest school, the school that has room in that particular grade level, and then the following year that student returns to their home school. This is a little bit different because typically we break sections leading up to June 1st, and that's what will be different in this case between the two schools. I will also tell you that we're continuing our collaboration and our discussions with Matt Cropper. Our team is talking and working with Mr. McClay at Holland as well as Mr. Smith at Wrightstown, and we do plan to discuss some ideas for possible long-term plans to address these issues. But for the purpose of tonight, we wanted to make sure you were aware of this idea, get your input, and then again, in a future meeting, we will discuss possible long-term, solutions and plans. But, I'm happy to answer any questions, and again, if you need some more detail, I'm happy to address that as well.
Questions? Mr. Salmon.
So, I don't know if I enjoy this. Using this year as the example, what would that have done if we did this year?
So right now, I'll use Wrightstown as an example. So in speaking with Mr. Smith, he said, looking ahead to next year, he thinks that he will cancel out. There is one grade level that's going to go down, another grade level that's going to go up. But if he has one more grade level that breaks a section, he doesn't have a classroom. So right now, it's almost like keeping it status quo to where we are. It doesn't solve the big issue. There's still going to be a STEAM specialist on a cart. We still have part of the, which you all know, part of the gym being used for a special. It doesn't solve the bigger issues, but we are just looking not to have to take any more space that, to avoid that if we can. Obviously, our goal is all the same. We want to make sure that every student has the best learning environment possible. And although these are two very big challenges and will, require many more meetings and discussion in the future, we're looking for a short-term plan to ensure that we're not taking any more classroom space because we just don't have it. Similar for Holland Elementary School as well. in speaking, Mr. Solomon with Mr. McClay recently, he's looking at how numbers have trended in the past. He just said to me recently that at that particular school, which is very common across the 10 elementary schools, you see a lot of registrations leading right up to that June 1st date, particularly in May, and we just don't want to take that chance. So, we're here to get some feedback, hear what your thoughts are, but we're just trying to keep our sections status quo in terms of numbers for next year, so that in the meantime, we can work with you, work with Matt Cropper and our team to make sure we have a longer term solution that works to address this.
Mr. Hidalgo?
Thank you. What are the current guidelines? It would be nice to see. You could just rattle them off, I'm sure, from going from 6th grade down. It's not 30 right now, it's 28 or?
No, they're the numbers.
These are the
This is-
guidelines?
yeah.
So what are you asking to?
So for example, if we had 3 kindergarten classrooms that next week, looking ahead to 1st grade next year, we're at the cap for all 3 sections. One more student will push us to 4 sections. That's where we would say, we are not going to open that 4th section at that particular school. That student registering would need to go to a neighboring school. We're currently discussing how to advertise this to the communities. And again, we don't want to do this, but we just are worried that leading up to June 1st, we don't have more classrooms to give.
I guess, yeah, I'm sorry, but it says suggested classroom size. So are those the current guidelines, or are they suggested guidelines, or is it the same thing? Is the suggested guidelines the current guidelines? Am I missing something? So if it's already the current guidelines, what are you asking from me? I was asking to speak for myself.
So what happens, for registration, we have a June 1st deadline, up until June 1st, midnight. We take all of our enrollments. And if we were looking at 1st grade at Wrightstown, we would take every student who enrolled, divide it by 25, and that would tell us how many 1st grade sections we would need. And at that point, that impacts staffing, that impacts the classroom spaces we need. So if we have 101 students at Wrightstown who registered by June 1st in 1st grade, we would need to use 5 classrooms. What Nicole is asking, instead of waiting till June 1st, as we have a rolling enrollment, as those classrooms cap right now between today and wherever the endpoint is, it could be June 1st, some of them will never be capped, but if they cap between now and June 1st at Wrightstown and at Holland Elementary, we're suggesting that we cap them now because we can't break another section after June 1st. And then those kids that, if it happens, would go to a partner school for 1 year, and they would get back into the fold the following year. Really, all it's doing is it's allowing us to remain status quo.
So I'm saying, I think we're already doing this. So what I thought you were asking was to go above the 25. We're not going above the numbers.
No, but
And I
we're
would say
moving ahead the deadline. We're moving ahead the time period.
And just
Of
to
when
give
we're gonna
some
cap.
perspective, real quick, we're looking at, it could change, but between the 2 schools, 3 sections that are looking like we're 6 away, 8 away, 10 away. So it's not every grade level in both schools. I would not expect that this would happen for more than perhaps 3, you never know, but 3 sections that are looking somewhat closer to being capped. I know unless you're doing this every day, like it can be a little difficult to wrap your head around.
Sure, I'm just like, you're saying status quo, it's already, you're not changing anything. The rules are what they've been that I'm familiar with. If you pop a section.
We're sliding it up, and we're saying we're not going to pop a section at those 2 schools.
Right, we can't.
Right.
So I completely understand that.
So I'm going to come around for questions, but again, just want to state that we're just changing the time period. This has always been the practice as of June 1st. And it's, as you say, this is an attempt at a short-term solution. Yeah. So Mrs. Kelly and Dr. Taylor.
I mean, that makes sense, since there's no space where you're going to put the kids, right? So you're going to hate the next question, though, because it's like, don't you think 30 kids in the class is too much? I mean, I know it's not going to solve any of the problems, but it's a lot of kids to have in one classroom for one teacher.
I agree, Ms. Polly. Looking at, the 16 years that I served at the elementary level as a building principal, also that 5th and 6th grade, those 2 grade levels, they're big too. The students are growing, they take up a lot of space, they have a lot of stuff. Ms. McKee remembers from years ago in 6th grade, it's certainly true, but I know it's a different discussion perhaps for another time, but working within these guidelines.
But is it something that, I guess the board decides that? What is the maximum per grade? I mean, is it a state, a county?
We do not have policy, the recommended class size guidelines, that it's really an agreement between the board and the association. We don't have anything in policy on that. I think it's outlined in our ARs, right? It's in our administrative regulations, yes.
But it would be good to figure out what is it going to take in order to have smaller class sizes. Definitely not 30. I know some schools could accommodate that, right, space-wise, but not all the schools. So I agree it's part of the biggest issue in question.
We only have 3 classrooms in the entire school that are 30.
No, I'm saying not 30. We have, say, 25 maximum in like 5th and 6th grade.
We
It's
created
not
a lot of
only
space around the district. We need a bigger hub.
So Dr. Thorne, you had something.
And perhaps I missed this on my 8 years in the board, but I know when my kids were there, that these were actually guidelines, and 25 meant we'd go to 27 if we had to. When did they become caps?
They've always been capped as far as I know.
No, they haven't been. That was a guideline, and if we had to pop, there was no way, if we had 76 kids, we'd pop another section when my kids were in school. So, they say guidelines for a reason. They're not hard stops. And I don't particularly care which way you go with this, but be mindful that there are parents like me out here who, before Hillcrest was redistricted and actually had the space, had 26, 27 second graders in a classroom. So this is new to me that these suddenly became caps. So, and if I seem a little irate, I am, because I love those caps when my kids were in school. And they weren't. They were guidelines. And we violated them all the time under Mark Klein. So, because we had to. So I would, whatever you want to do is fine, but I think if I'm the one lone parent who's getting sent to another school, and I know this thing is happening, it doesn't sit well with me. That you could have easily made one classroom 27 and kept my kid with his or her peers for the year. And throw an 8 in there if you think you need that. But I am not of the, it says guidelines, and it really does say guidelines just for that reason. These were never caps in my recollection. So.
I understand, and there are many ways to look at this for certain, just going back to that discussion, what we often feel at the, especially I'll just take primary grades, 25 kindergartners in that class. It's a lot of 5-year-olds, and some have special needs, some require additional attention. So I see where you're coming from. There are many ways you can look at this. My worry about going beyond these numbers is in a general ed setting that is already a lot of students when you hit those higher numbers, 27 kindergarten, first grade, it's a lot, but I respect that.
Then we should have been redistricting more than every 30 years. I'm just because this is what happens if you don't adjust to population density. So, okay, I'm done.
Thank you. Mrs. Marcel?
I just wanted to mention that I think it's really important to, if this is the path forward that the board decides to go on, I think it's really important to just make sure that the Wrightstown community and that the parents that are sending to that school know about this, that it's not just in the newsletter that they might miss. because I know a lot of people really focus on that June 1 deadline, even if they have a younger sibling that they need to enroll, and that they may wait until the date that they're used to, whether it's for kindergarten and when those dates are. Like, so I would just say that if this is what the board wants to do, that there's really like an active way to communicate with the parents that are in that school to make sure that they know, so that they don't end up, just, I know I occasionally even see newsletters come in and I forgot about like a wacky Wednesday or some type of, day that I was supposed to send something in, but this is really important. And so I would say if there's a way to either send something home, do a meeting, you guys can decide how to communicate. I just think that if this was the situation, my children go to Soul Findstone, well, my son, so I only have one now. But if this was me, I would be so worried, especially if I had kids that were about to be registered for any of those grades potentially. So that's my only thing. I just think communication is key. If that's the decision that the board and the administration would like to pursue. Thank you.
Can I ask another question? So what happens if Hillcrest has no room for the kid that signs up at Holland? Are they going to go now to Churchville?
It would be the closest school geographically that has space in that particular grade level.
And how many ELL students have we had at this point?
Total students?
Total students?
77?
And that's continually fluctuating. So we could end up closing out Holland, for instance. Those kids register there, they're going to be shipped wherever else. It's going to be a staffing issue for that new school as well. Okay. Yeah, we got to get in front of this. The patch has to be notified, Bucks and Acre times. People are, realtors' offices. This is going to be a surprise to a lot of people that are settling into these areas and going to be told they possibly not go to that school. I don't know how you do that. And listen, this is not on you guys. This is a bad redistricting. This is going back in time in history. This is middle schools that are the same size. We can pull it all out of the box if you want to talk about it. But, the one thing that these schools are community-based schools. And these kids want to be with their friends. The parents want their kids with those. That's why they move here. They're not moving here to be shipped 2 schools away.
Yes, Mr. Roosevelt.
Yeah, just to connect with some of the other dots that have been thrown out on this table. All of us are sensitive to what's going on at Wrightstown. And much like the calendar that we just discussed, it really isn't a right move that's going to make everybody happy. You can do something and it's going to upset people. For a variety of reasons that Mr. Salmon just laid out, we are effective. This is the hand that we've been dealt. And I think it's a difficult job. I hear what Mr. Feller is saying. I recognize what Mr. Salmon's saying. I hear what Mrs. Myself saying. I hear what you're saying. There really isn't a magic wand to fix this. We need a bigger boat, or we need a different redistricting. And that's not going to happen overnight or in 1 year. I think that I agree that this needs to be communicated in some way, but people are going to be upset. But I hope they understand that we don't really have a better short-term solution. And because of previous redistricting and renovations, et cetera, this is where we're at. Just look at how long it's taking us to do the Richboro Elementary project. This does not happen over a summer. And so, this is choosing your poison.
And we are discussing those long-term ideas, and we do plan to share those, but for the sake of getting feedback tonight and just discussing short-term, we felt this was important to do sooner than later.
Yeah.
And again, any other ideas or feedback, we are always welcome to hear them, but it is tough. No matter how you look at it, there are some significant space issues, and I worry, about Wrightstown and more classrooms having to be taken and more specialists out on parts and more more students, working in not the best environment like the gym, and learning. No one wants that, but we're doing
Yeah.
our best to navigate.
I mentioned, I think a few months after I was on the board, that I saw things being done and this isn't, once again, at anybody's feet here around the table, but things being done out of sequence. So I'm really happy that we're getting the demographics done, and we're getting it done over 3 years to pick up the delta. I'm glad that we took our time on Richboro to make sure that we didn't continue making the mistakes. We should be understanding, and redistricting is the other piece in all of this. So people don't like change. I remember going to Wrightstown several times because this community is upset about the tightness, and I agree. Losing cafeteria and library and gym space and juggling all of these things isn't ideal. Having, some of the creative solutions that have happened up there, they're making it work, but it is difficult, but it's happy now that I think we're going through this in a proper sequence, so hopefully we can get better results, but that takes time. There isn't a magic wand, and when people get upset over one thing, and then they come out with vitriol and venom over that one thing, oftentimes it's really nice to have calmer heads prevail, sit down and understand everything else that's wrapped up, and then you find yourself in this spot. What can we do? We can't continue on the path and mess things more up, but it's going to take time. I've got confidence that over some time we can sort this out, but people don't like change. Even going to Wrightstown a couple times, you hear they don't want to move, and they don't want their friends to move. The teachers move around sometimes from different schools in this district, and they never want to leave. And then when they get there, they're happy that they're there. So, but nobody's happy with change, unless it's like gleaming.
And it could be possible that looking at these sections, we don't have new registrations, and it would have been just the same as any other year with that June 1st date. We're just trying to get one step ahead and forward think a little bit so that we're not, after the fact, wondering where we're going to get this space. So I do want to reinforce that piece too. We're not sure what's going to happen. We're just trying to plan for the worst, so to speak. And not that registrations are a bad thing, but you know what I mean in this context, that we would have a space issue.
I have a question. Are we going to separate?
Oh, sorry,
I didn't know she had a question.
So, I just want to clarify. What we're talking about is for new registrations. It's for kids that have families that have not been necessarily there yet. So if someone moves into the area, or someone has a child that will go to kindergarten, and so these are not kids that are already there, and we're pushing away from their friends in another school, right? Okay.
Just new registrations.
But I'll take it a step further. What if it's your sibling? And we have to go above the standard.
You're in bad luck. Just kidding. So when are we going to have the actual plan with the numbers that looks at projections, demographics, and how we're going to solve this in the long term? Because Wrightstown is a big problem, right? So we have to address the issue at depth at some point. And I know we're looking for data. Are you planning to have discussion about that in the future?
We are. We've discussed everything from redistricting, construction, programs, all of it. And we're working with Matt Cropper as well. I know in the last meeting he did do that assessment of the forecast. We're going to continue to work with him beyond that piece too. But I shared with Ms. McKee that we are looking to, sooner than later, come before you again with some ideas and get that feedback.
Thank you.
Can you answer my question again?
Yeah, please.
What are we going to do with siblings that are new registration? And if they pop us on that section? We're going to separate siblings? You can't do that.
No, we would not separate siblings, just to to go back to Mrs. Polly's question, if you're already enrolled in the school, we're
That
talking
counts
about
consistently
new
with the
enrollments.
families. So that's gotta be broadcast.
Yeah, that's the communication.
That's gotta be
Very
clear.
clear.
So if you have a second grader in the school and you're registering a first grader, you're still in the same school. And if you look at the numbers, if you look at our enrollment by month, I was just looking at our January enrollment, that, as Nicole said, in those two schools, we have 3 sections that really are causing us some pause right now across those 2 buildings. But it could be that, that this is really doesn't have an impact because we don't have new people moving in who've not already been registered to the school. But in the event that that does happen, we just cannot, we don't have the space to put another section.
So again, I know that we're all looking at possible solutions here. And again, I say this is just a very immediate short term looking at next year. I just reviewed my notes from our presentation when we had the Cropper study come into us. And we were getting 5-year projections on that and what it looked like. And what I have in my notes was that it would hit elementary the hardest and that there would be no immediate relief for Wrightstown and Holland in that study. So immediate relief means to me we have to look at next year, what does immediate relief look like for those buildings? And I understand none of this is easy, and I am very sympathetic to parents and how they and their children would feel about this. So I would just reiterate that the practice is not new. This has been our practice. We would just move the date up for this. And I am also reminded of something Dr. Sanko said when we were at the meeting at Richboro and talking to Richboro parents. And you make the point continually that we want our students in a good learning environment. We want them to be in a classroom that fits. We want them to have the best opportunities in their schools. And unfortunately, if it looks like they may not be in their home school to do that, I think the priority has to be that they be in a school where they have a desk in a classroom. So again, none of us like the solutions. I don't know what else to propose or what other direction to give administration at this point. Mr. Hickey, you look like you have an idea.
You don't want to talk to me about redistricting, we would be here till tomorrow. I have a question, but when a kid is, say for example, you get a new registration in Wrightstown, there's no room for him as a, let's just say, 3rd grader. What happens when he's in 4th grade and there's no room?
So our practice right now, longstanding practice, is when those classrooms at any given school reach that capacity, those numbers, and it's after the June 1st deadline, they move to a partner school. They move to the partner school for 1 year, right? So let's use Wrightstown as an example. Let's just suppose in 2nd grade, every section has 25 students in it. It's November 15th, and you move in with your son to Wrightstown in 2nd grade. We would say to you, we don't have any room in that school. For this year, you have to go to Newtown Elementary. You're there temporarily because that registration window opens for the next year. You automatically are enrolled in Wrightstown.
But what happens if there's no room there? What happens if you're capped as the 2nd year?
You're not capped. You're not capped in a 2nd year because we tally and accumulate all the registrations up to June 1st. And I go back to what I said earlier. If we have a certain number of kids divided by the 25, 26, 28, 30, that tells us how many sections we need.
But I believe you're also asking if it's Wrightstown that doesn't have space. Is that the difference?
Right.
The next year, we'll break that section like I was sharing earlier, but
So then you would break a section.
you're asking about Wrightstown
Yep.
specifically, we still don't have room. I think we would have, personally, I feel like we'd have to look at that closer to that year and make those decisions. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a huge fan of, I think kids should go to the schools with their neighbors, that they shouldn't be isolated, whether it be whatever grade you want to talk about. So like you said, I would actually almost use the guidelines. I mean, something else that I've always said that I've just never gets any traction is, I'd ask kids if they want to transfer back. You talk specifically about Wrightstown, why don't you see if kids want to come back to Richboro and let them go the path that way?
We've talked about that as well.
I'm not saying it would work, I'm not saying how the numbers would shake out, but I'm just talking about that particular community, you know. I mean, I don't know how you deal with the Holland situation, I mean, maybe there's something along the same lines, but, you know, a redistricting or something is definitely going to happen where, but I don't think it's right you take a kid that's new to a neighborhood, he just meets his friends, and now for the next year, he's going to go to possibly the next school over, but maybe 2 schools over, where he'll never see them during the day, and their parents won't know the parents, and it'll take them, you know, a year or so to get adjusted. Now, I know that's common practice, but like you said, I would almost rather see that, you know, the guideline is a guideline and not a hard stop.
If I can make a couple comments, and I think I'm confident I can speak for Al, Nicole, and myself, we agree completely. We want kids in their home schools, we want kids in a space where they can get our educational programming, and that move to another school, it doesn't happen routinely. It's really an exception rather than the rule. I believe last year across the district, we had 4 or 5 students that were displaced because it was after that June 1st deadline and those numbers were capped. And I'm not speaking just about Wrightstown, I'm talking about across the whole district. But that's been our practice in Council Rock since that June 1st deadline was adopted several years ago. So I think we're all in agreement with you. We want kids in their home schools, we want them with their peers, the parents with the parents. But as Nicole said, we know that these are pressure points for us. We know we have issues there and we don't have a quick long-term fix. To your point about school parents having a chance and an option to pick whether they want to be at Wrightstown or the school they left through redistricting, that's some of the work we're doing with Matt Cropper right now. We're looking at the number of students who were redistricted from Richboro Elementary to Wrightstown when we redistricted. And I don't know if you can weigh in on that at all.
Yes, it's because that actual redistricting took place, I think in 2019, I might be wrong. So those students, Matt Cropper is trying to isolate for us what grade level those students would be in now. I think we said probably 4, 5, 6. So, you know, I mean, we think about a lot of possibilities, you know, and again, some of these possibilities take you down different rabbit holes, and they might not be great solutions, but you know, we want what's best for kids in terms of, you know, education in their home neighborhood and a quality environment. So we're open to a lot of things, and we're exploring a lot of different possibilities. The idea that maybe you survey that population to see if possibly they would be willing to return to Richboro. Again, you know, how do you know you're ultimately going to hit the sweet spot in terms of numbers, right? We would have a number in mind in terms of, wow, this would be an ideal response to our survey. Sometimes you put out a survey, you don't quite get the ideal response. So that takes you down a different avenue. So, but these are all considerations that we've had when we have our internal conversations about you know, schooling and different setups of schools, and junior high versus middle school models, and kindergarten centers. We put it all out on the table, but it's rare that you know, you're not going to get that one magic solution.
Well, and to everyone else's suggestion, since it is a possibility, I'm not sure where this is going to go right now, but since the possibility exists that we're not going to wait till that June 1st deadline, I would say that it has to go out there now that this is a possibility, you know, that schools may be capped, and, you know, whatever avenues it has to be broadcast, that it get broadcast sooner rather than later so people don't get blindsided.
Just to share my new role, certainly 100% we want students in their home schools. But what's interesting, and this just goes along with what we've been reinforcing about the importance of having students in the right environment and maybe not overcrowding and going higher in the numbers, is that I handle any kind of area boundary exceptions requests from parents. And interestingly enough, some parents do come back and say, last year, my child had to move to Newtown because, whatever the scenario is, that school, their homeschool was full. We'd like to stay now in the new school. I share that only because I think it speaks volumes for the great buildings that we have and the great learning going on. That's not what we want, but I think it's just an interesting anecdote to share that I've gotten several of those phone calls since being up here that parents want to stay in the new school versus even going back. So I think it's just something to keep in mind that we've had, in the rare instances that it's happened, positive feedback from the parents in those instances.
The other thing, since we're going further in this conversation than we were prepared to because we have a lot of work to do yet, but it's important for you to know and for our community to know that we keep siblings together. We give the parents an opportunity to keep siblings together. So those examples that Nicole's talking about or that I referenced, if somebody has to be displaced and there are two other children in the family, we offer the families an opportunity to take all three of their kids to the same school for 1 year and then return to their home school. So, in those rare instances, they're displaced from their home school, but they're with their siblings for that 1 year.
Do you need anything else from us tonight?
I don't believe so.
Just wanted to raise that, have the conversation,
Have
make
the
everyone aware.
conversation.
Great. So anything finally from the board? Yes, Mr.
I'm gonna say
Galgo.
something silly, but that's par for the course. When I came into this position, it was this redistricting. I remember Jerry Grubb saying, "Are you sure you want to do this now?" And it was a whole thing about getting rid of the musty old module classrooms. I remember seeing them at Richborough when I was looking at houses at Rolling Hills Elementary School. They were nasty looking. And then we redistricted, and I wasn't for it. I didn't think that it was going the right way. Thought that we would have this problem. And so I say, one of the solutions is going back maybe to what we were trying to get rid of in the first place, right? Listen to me. If you're talking about a year solution, I know the land development I heard was 1 year to get something in there. I'm not talking about a permanent thing. I'm talking about putting a classroom in there if it's possible, a mobile classroom, as one of the solutions that everybody's thinking is ugly. It's just, at least see what the price is on it. I don't think if you get a brand new classroom, and it's not what I wanted, it's not what I wanted to have these bottlenecks and everybody be pushed up to the north, and now we have this problem at Wrightstown. So I'm looking we're talking about moving kids, and there's no perfect solution. But to me, you need space. They're in the gymnasium right now. I cringe more at a gymnasium than I do kids learning in the gymnasium than I do a mobile classroom. That's just me. There just seems to be some whatever you call it, stigmatism against mobile classrooms. And I'm saying temporary, 1 year, 2 year. To me, it's and that's your opinion. You have an opinion. So I'm just going to put it out there. And it's not even that's what I'm advocating for. But I think at least it should be entertained. That's all.
So I'm
not even saying I want it. Go ahead.
Okay, I just wanted to share a response, and you and I think we've had this conversation. I've taught in those, and it's certainly not optimal. And the world has changed so much from the time I ever taught in a modular. The security and safety concerns for me make that an absolute no-go. To have children outside the building, that I would really strongly suggest we not try.
Again, of course, there are security things, but there are measures you can do to make it a courtyard, so to speak. But number two, does Bucks County Community College still have their mobiles that they've had for 20 years? Well, okay, Bucks County Community College has very nice mobile classrooms. They're double-wide trailers that they've just upkept and maintained. I don't think they demolished them. Maybe we should go over there and take a look at what they're doing at Bucks County Community College. I don't think it's a riprap institution over there. So I think we have an astigmatism that should at least be, there's solutions for security. And we need a solution here. And we're in a tight spot with Wrightstown, and I say, not saying I'm advocating for it, but to not even think about it, I think, and to discount it. Brand new facility, it just happens to be mobile, not a bad thing.
Anybody else?
Just pick up a little bit on Mr. Hidalgo's point. I know there's some people around here that probably don't want me to mention this. I think generally, I remember seeing those mobile units outside Richboro and outside some schools, and I agree that's a security problem. At Wrightstown, number one, the mobile or modular, we should call them, have some advancements. And so there is the possibility to put these inside that courtyard of Wrightstown Elementary School so that that helps the security issue. It's not like they're leaving the perimeter of the building. I think, however, there's going to be a cost and availability issue that might make it difficult. And I agree that nobody wants to have their kid going in there. There is technically the opportunity with the right one to make it seem like you're not walking outside to walk back inside. It could be seamless with those doors. I agree. I'm not sold on this either, but throwing things out there, I think that some of the people in the Wrightstown community was in favor of this. I don't think it's a good solution either, and I'm not advocating for it either, but I don't have a problem if we spend a little bit of time investigating to confirm or deny where we're going.
Thank you.
But I'm not sold on the idea either, but a lot of us are sensitive to what's going on in that community.
Mrs. Marcel?
I was just going to add that there's a lot of thoughts in this area, but I don't want to send the administrations going down a path for this necessarily if it isn't feasible. Like, I know that there are certain septic rules, the township would potentially have to do permits. I don't know if they would, I can't speak for them, but like they may not necessarily want it. Like there's just there's a lot, it's like there are a lot of layers to onion. And so it's not that it's a bad idea or a good idea. I personally remember the trailers when I was a student here, and they were intended to be temporary. And when I moved here as an adult with my kids that are still here, that was just like a very concerning thing. And so I'm really glad that they're gone. And it could be that the community, is interested. I know we were talking about like the inside of the school, the kind of courtyard area because it's safe, but because of septic and permits, and there are so many different layers to it. And I feel like we keep talking, and this is what Mr. Salmon said, we keep talking about all of these things, and the root problem goes back to redistricting our secondary schools. And the work, I think, this administration should be done looking at this like kind of long-term thing of what do we need to do to make it work, as Ed was talking about, like that. This might just be something for right now that has to be done, but at the end of the day, and I didn't support redistricting either, because I didn't like putting this north-south boundary through one of the smallest schools in the district. But it is what it is, we can't do anything about it. But I think that I'm just concerned about looking at things that aren't really focused on the problem at hand, which is the secondary schools and then the elementary schools having to fit within that. So anyway, it is what it is, but I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, we can't solve this tonight.
Not tonight, no.
Sorry.
Yeah. And I know, as you said, we'll be hearing more at our next meeting about some longer-term solutions. So, if there's nothing else from the board, I believe that concludes our meeting for tonight. If there is any public comment, I would invite you to try to limit your comments to maybe 3 minutes. And if you could, try and direct it to agenda items this evening. Anyone? You are so cooperative. Yes.
Sorry.
I just have a quick question as first. So with the Knights for Knowledge program, which sounds super successful and well received, is there any discussion or even identified need for extending that to reading and or reading and writing at all?
Go ahead.
We've talked about it a lot just in general, but for now, we focus more on just making sure that this is a success and you know, implementing the best program we can, but the topic has come up in discussion for sure, and we're having some, Mrs. Booth has shared some ideas, but again, we're more focused on the here and now and some of those other, addressing some of the questions that came up tonight and making sure that we're hitting on all those points that we need to. But it's a question that we've received as well. How can we expand even next year to a language arts?
The other part I would add to that, you heard Tom Barnes, Dr. Barnes talk about starting to pull ELA data. We want to see what that says to us. You know, we went at the math, we attacked the math grades 3 to 8. We've spoken about extending that. We're learning with Tom as he's going through the data sets, and we want to kind of do the same with ELA.
Thank you so much for being with us tonight. I believe we are adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.